I'm Johanna Rothman, and you're listening to the Agile Uprising podcast.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I'm your host again, Jay Hersko. Joined with me, I have good friend of mine, fellow Agile practitioner, Mike Cadell. Mike, how you doing?
Doing well, Jay. Howdy, y'all.
Hello. And tonight we are going to be talking about the person who probably is the only person who turned lemons into lemonade during the coronavirus, the prolific author, Johanna Rothman, just came out with 3 more books, right? Most people struggle with writing one. She came out with 3 at the same time. Practical Ways to Manage Yourself, Practical Ways to lead, serve, and manage others, Practical Ways to lead an innovative organization. And we're going to be talking with the author herself, Johanna Rothman. Johanna, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I love being on this show.
We love having you. I forgot who you just displaced as our number 1 recurring guest. So fantastic. So we're going to start off with the obvious question, Johanna. What inspired you to write these 3 books all of a sudden? And they're all separate, but they're all completely related.
So I had written management myths. I'd written a series of them, 36, one a month for 36 months. And I thought, oh, I will just notice that just in quotes, just collect them. That'll be a short book of 36,000 words, maybe 40,000 words. People will read it. It will be lovely. And I started to put it together and I said, oh, I better explain to people what options they have. Oh, I better add a little intro to this. Oh, I need to do a little bit more refinement here. And I said, I can't do one book, 600 pages. Nobody's going to read it. So that's why they're all connected, because it's all about managers seeing the system, creating an environment where people can do their best job. I mean, it's all that stuff. But if I had put it together in one book, nobody would have read this.
Well, it would have. It would have taken forever. I mean, I can tell you, Ben and I and another guy, Scott Wagner, we tried reading Douglas Hofstadter's Gödel Escher Bach, Johanna, which is 900 something pages. And we got to one point where we were reading in 150 chunks, 150 page chunks. So you might be right with the 600 page mark. Because at one point, Ben turns to me and he goes, I think I've read all I need to hear from Dougie. Can we move on to something else? And I went, yep, too much.
Yeah.
So, Joanna, one of the things I really resonated with me from this body of work was your perspective on what is a manager and what is a manager's role. And could you maybe talk a bit about that? Because I love your perspective on this.
So I have found that the best managers, in terms of people who seem to have a lot of employee engagement, people who seem to succeed, regardless of the environment that they are in and the greater environment, all manage to somehow manage themselves enough so that they can create an environment where everybody else can succeed. And it's that environment thing that seems to be, I think, really hard for people to do, because so far we've been all told, what are you going to accomplish this year, right? And it's our performance management idiocies are all about your personal goals, and this happens to managers, and nobody ever says to a manager, your job is to create an environment where people can succeed. So that's really what we need. And I figured that's why I could not stop myself. I had to write these books. Yeah.
So, one of the other themes that really comes through is the difference between being the boss and managing other people's work and serving other people. And you very articulately lay out how, as a manager, your job really is to serve your people, kind of ties to the environment. So that anything you can add to that?
Yeah. So when we say the word serve, a lot of people go right to servant leadership and they think, oh my goodness, all those people who talk about religion. No, no, no religion here. No religion. This is totally agnostic. It's about when I find that if so, okay, let me pop back up the stack I have in my own brain. Um, we often ask managers to literally direct the work of other people. We employ adults. They manage to get themselves pretty much dressed, pretty much fed. They go to work at a reasonable time. They enter into long-term contracts with other people. They have dogs. They have cats. And you guys can't see us. There's a cat behind Jay. I mean, they have. We have families. We have older people. We have younger people. We are responsible humans. Why do we think that human beings cannot take responsibility at work to get their work done? I am totally of the opinion that people live up or down to your expectations of them. And if you clarify the expectations and you ask, do you need any support from me? Do you need any training? Do you need to work on a different team? I mean, there's all kinds of things you might ask, but then people can actually do the work that they need to do, which means we serve people by helping them figure out either what work do I want to do, and do I have that work in this organization for you as an employee? Because maybe, maybe not. And how can I, as a manager, find help you find your best fit in the organization? And that's what I mean about leading and serving others. It's not, and that's really for me what servant leadership is, right? Not the religious stuff. It's all about how do we create that environment where people can succeed.
And one of the questions. So I emailed. I didn't email. One of our contributors, listeners, Claudia, emailed a bunch of questions, and one of her questions she had for you, Johanna, was one of the things you were just poking at, which is how do you explain the difference between management and leadership? Because a lot of times people use those terms interchangeably, and I think we all know that. You just made a very insightful remark when you said a good manager will understand their people's strengths and find a way to maximize those strengths to the happiness of both the contributor and to the overall organization. But that doesn't necessarily mean a good leader. Good leaders also do that, but there is a differentiation between a manager and a leader. I mean, is there not? I mean, it's not just a
No,
semantic thing.
no, 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 no.
No.
We have this artificial separation. A
Okay.
manager without leadership is a directing and controlling person. A leader without any understanding of what management is, where you lead and serve others, create a harmonic whole for a given team and across the organization, and understand the organization's why, right? The strategy behind the organization. If you start to separate leadership and management, you have either people going off over there because they're leaders, or we have directing and controlling over here where because they're managers. We have to bring them back together.
Kind of another top point in that general vein that really jumped out at me was in book 2. You mentioned there's 7 principles for leading and serving others, and what really caught me though was after those principles, there was a comment that transparency and communication are not explicitly listed, and some people may have an allergic reaction to that, but that's a brilliant bit there. Would you uh, go into that a little bit more?
Sure. So let me actually get get to the principles, because otherwise I won't remember all of them. So I mean, well, it's totally true. I will just freely admit it. I mean, I have these 7 principles. So the first one is to clarify the team's purpose, right? We're talking about leading and serving others. So it's a team or it's several teams. It's but it's team focused as opposed to organizational focused. And if you understand the team's purpose, then you can say, what is the value that the team is supposed to offer, and how can I help the team offer that value? Now, this is not the micromanagement. This is really supporting the structure of the team, supporting the team's environment. Then the next one is build empathy with the people who do the work. The third is build a safe environment, because if you don't have safety, certainly psychological safety, you can never make mistakes, which is in number five, experiments and learning. Um, and number four is seek outcomes and optimize for an overarching goal. How many times have you been in an organization where they say, you only need to know this little bit in this little box, and you don't need to know any more, which means you sub optimize, right? You optimize maybe for where you are. I'm going to talk in agile terms in the sprint, because you don't actually know the goal for the whole product. You don't know what the product is supposed to return to the organization. You only know the sprint goal. And while you might need a sprint goal or a project goal or something, you need to know, where does the organization need to be? That's the overarching goal. Um, Now, I said number five was encourage experiments and learning. Number six is catch people succeeding. When we appreciate other people, when we say, "Oh, Jay, I really like what you did with organizing the Google Doc for tonight," and Mike, maybe you had done that. I don't know which one of you did
I
that.
did.
But
It's all Mike.
okay. Oh, thank you, Mike. So, but when I say that to you, you understand. I looked at it. I actually appreciate what it is, and I actually made some comments there because I'm impossible. And then with number seven is exercise your value-based integrity. We all are in situations where people often say to us, "Can't you just?" And every time I hear anything after the just, it's probably not according to my integrity. Now, we in the US, we have healthcare based on our employers. I am not going to tell you to stand on your integrity and put your family out into the street. No, but I will tell you, you should look for another job. So, and if you think about all seven of these, that that allows you to have transparency. That allows you to have communication, right? But if you don't have psychological safety, it does not matter if you say, "Oh, communication is really important." Yeah, fine.
Very, I love that whole catch people succeeding, right? Because that is the one of the greatest tragedies is in life, especially as working professionals, is when you see someone who's not only is their potential not met, but their brilliance isn't recognized. And that's something that it literally costs you nothing more than a couple of words. That's all it costs you. Maybe 45 seconds of your time, and the value add on that statement, just telling someone or acknowledging their hard work or their good job, is so powerful. And it's kind of, sadly, it's kind of lost on this internet enabled culture we've got here. One of the things I want to ask you, Johanna, and this theme has showed up in, I think, almost all of your books, and I love it, and I've actually stolen it quite a few times. The idea of congruence. I
Yeah.
like you to. I love that very simple diagram with the three pieces. It kind of, to me, it reminds me of Trivial Pursuit. Can you explain your usage of that term and how it relates to actually all three of these books, if not most of your oeuvre overall?
So congruence is from Virginia Satir, right? So she came up with the congruence model that says we balance, when we are congruent, we balance ourselves, the other person, and the context in the communication. And I find that when I am congruent, I do balance all those. I am a blaming person. If something, if I kind of encounter some kind of a wacko thing, I will immediately go to blame. And the only thing I know how to do for myself is to keep my mouth shut until I figure out what is really going on. Some people placate. right? So, well, blame it. We understand. We blame the other person. So we are everything. The other person is, nothing. Um, Placaters abound in the organization. We all know multitasking is useless. We know this. We know it hurts everything. We know that when developers multitask, they create defects. When testers multitask, they miss defects. When project people multitask, they don't realize the risk. When managers multitask, they make everything take longer. I mean, we know multitasking is stupid. And what happens to us? Some hippo, right, a highest paid person's opinion says you must do all of these things as opposed to choosing one of them. And what do the managers down the stream do? They say, "Okay, I'll try." I'm really not very good at placating. So, which you probably noticed since you read all these books and you notice my answers to all these interactions. So, but we do, and um, when we have blamers and placaters in the same organization, we have trouble getting anything at all done. Then there are people who are irrelevant. They might think about the people and well, they're super reasonable, I should say. They have totally forgotten that there are humans in the equation. Well, studies say pair programming is much better than doing code review later. Like, hello, Johanna just said she's not comfortable with pairing. Why are you telling me this, right? Why can you not talk to me as if I'm a human? And
Mm.
um, I will freely admit I did not get into software because I loved people. You probably heard me say this, Jay, several times. I got into software because I love solving problems with computers. So I am not a people person by nature. I realize it is important for me to be a people person because otherwise I let the other people down.
Mm. Mm. And Mike, we just had this conversation. The whole idea of speaking of people person, the idea of empathetic versus an empath, and then
Yeah.
how sometimes we as people who um who feel so powerfully how another person is feeling, it kind of becomes it's a struggle to not let that overwhelm you, and it's a struggle to center yourself in a way that you can be the most productive with them. Yep. I do my best because I'm counting on you. Yeah, Maya
Yeah.
Angelou. What is it? I do my best because I'm counting on you counting on me. Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
We were just having this conversation around that whole piece. What was your next question, Mike?
um, something that you touched on briefly just a few minutes ago, Joanna. That's the idea of psychological safety and trust and relationships. And one of the things that really jumped out at me is relationships are at the heart of innovative teams. So I wonder if you could share a bit about your thoughts on trust, relationships, psychological safety, because it resonates for me. Sure.
So we need to be able to make mistakes. And if we do not trust our colleagues, how can we, especially to have our backs, right? If we cannot trust our colleagues, how can we ever put ourselves out there to be vulnerable and make mistakes? It turns out this is important for the manager to manage him or herself, because when managers can admit that they are wrong and they need help, they they offer that as a model for everybody else in the team that they serve. And if we want to have experiments, especially very fast cycle, short feedback loop, small experiments, we need to be able to trust in each other. So if I say to Jay, I really want help with this experiment. If Jay says to me, "Oh, you're not too bright today, Johanna, are you?" I might not be, right? It's all yeah, for those for those of you who don't know, we're recording in the evening. So yeah, I might not be too bright right now. But um if he does not extend me the trust and support my work, I why would I support his?
Mhm.
And then the whole idea of a team goes out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of related to that, one place you made the comment, consider using the word trust instead of empower. I can't tell you how many times I've cringed hearing people say, you should feel empowered, you should be empowered, you're empowered. But then the behaviors of that person who's saying you're empowered clearly say, I don't trust you and I'm going to ask you for, daily status reports. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
just,
Oh, the empowered word really kills me. Um, um, my mother used to make asparagus, and she would cook it until it was dead. Um, I mean, that poor. I don't think asparagus should have ever looked gray and wilted. However, she used to tell me it was good for me, and I would like it. That's how I feel about the word empowered in the organizations. It's
Mm.
like my mother's asparagus. My poor mother.
my mother used to
I
burn the green
never,
beans.
I never learned how to like asparagus. I just never did. Right?
Oh,
But
come
your
by. I'll
point,
cook some on my big green egg for you. It's awesome.
but you make a very valid point, though. There are terms that, and it's, never attributed to malice, what can easily be attributed to stupidity or ignorance. And there are terms that we almost overuse to the point where it becomes detrimental. Terms like self-organizing, self-driven teams, or, empowerment, or even the servant leadership, right? The term servant leadership, when you really understand it, it just makes sense. But then, there was a conversation going on Discord today where someone said, I can't believe when I see that in people's resumes. Like, what does that actually mean? And we had a very interesting conversation about using that actual term. I mean, I'll be honest, and I'm going to give her a public shout out. A coworker of ours, Sarah, she inadvertently explained, not explained, she defined servant leadership in a way I'd never seen done before. She actually took an org chart and she flipped it upside down. And she said, think about it this way. When you look at it this way, it's a hierarchy and everybody's on top of everybody else leading up to the CIO or CEO. She said, but when you flip it upside down, those people form a support structure. And it's basically like a giant net, culminating in the person who can offer the most support at any given time. And I never heard it put that way, but I said that's a really powerful, simple way to explain that term. And the way it came up is we were talking about running into a middle manager who doesn't understand where their space was in the new world, in the new agile world, right? Because let's be honest here, you pull up that safe big picture, middle managers aren't on there, CEO's not on there either, but that's another discussion for another time. And that was one of the things that we said, well, this is how you open that person's eyes. That support structure does not go away with whatever we're doing. It becomes actually more vital. And I thought that was really super powerful. I mean, it's a very simple visual that you can flip it on its ear and run with it. I did want to ask you, Johanna, which you've talked about in a couple of your books, the concept of flow and resource efficiency versus flow efficiency. And you actually have a quote here. It's, individuals and teams perform incomparable work, which leads to, you should measure flow, not productivity. And then you have the money quote of indispensable people are bottlenecks, which I thought,
Yep.
I read that and I went, this is totally true. 100%.
Yeah. So I mean, the good news about having gray hair is that I've been around for a while and I have seen many, many instances where a manager would say, I have this really wonderful person and I only have one of him. It's almost often a him in my experience, which is not to say women cannot be bottlenecks, but I find that it most often occurs with men. And the manager says, I don't know what to do. So I said, all of your work is flowing through that person. And they said, oh, no, 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 no. He's just really, really good. I said, no, all the work is flowing through. Let me show you a value stream map. This is before I actually understood what value stream maps were. I actually drew pictures and said, here's item one. And notice it goes through Annie and then Dan and then Jay and then it goes to Fred. And Fred, all the work has to go through Fred. All the work sits behind Fred. If Fred wants to take a vacation, you're out of luck. What are you
Mhm.
going to do? You're not going to ship anything. You're not going to do anything else. So that's when I first started to realize that I started to work with people and say, how can you make your indispensable person less indispensable? Can you send him or her on vacation? Can you send him or her to another team? Can you ask Fred to pair or mob with the entire team? Why would you put yourself at risk for having I
Uh-huh.
like this is often called the bus number. I much prefer Fiji, right? Retirement in Fiji with an umbrella drink. So what happens if Fred wants to go to Fiji? Because almost always Fred is in his 60s. Fred has
Uh-huh.
been doing this work for 20 years. Nobody else understands the internals. This is a huge, huge problem.
The Standish group has something they call the law of the empty chair, which is the most important person on your team will disappear at the least opportune time. And that is another reason to think about, I have this constraint, right? Because the way you describe it, that's truly a system constraint.
Yep.
And if I'm not going to figure out how to mitigate that constraint, it's eventually going to come back and bite me in the rear. And that's, like you said, not just the bus. They retire to Fiji, they win the lottery and say, you know what, I'm just not doing this anymore. You basically are behind the eight ball from that second forward.
Yeah, kind of ties to another line that really stuck out to me was heroes, experts, and 10x people prevent everyone else from learning. So when everything's bottled up behind Fred or Brent or whoever, other people that's preventing the flow of learning. Kind of Jay, going back to Peter Merrill's perspective on things, that the learning organization.
Mm-hmm.
So, of that. Joanna, I have to give you credit. I used something out of your book earlier this week with my client. There was a discussion where somebody was talking about making rules for the team. And they were talking in front of the people and calling them the team and saying, we're going to make rules for the team. After I finished cringing, I said, why don't we, what would you think about, instead of making rules, creating some guidelines? I was thinking back to the transform rules and the guidelines. Could you share a bit about the thought underneath that? Because I think it's brilliant. And it got
Well,
this team out of a bad spot.
thank you. I'm really glad that my work helped that team get out of a bad spot. So I have found that a lot of so the managers who want to inflict rules on other people often come from a good place, right? They want to smooth out the flow of work. They want to make sure people can do a good job, but they don't actually trust people to do the good job. And often they're not empathizing with the people who actually know what the work is. So I have found it much more useful to say, legally, we have these guidelines. We can't go over here. We can't go over there. We have to stay somewhere in the middle. And depending on the kind of organization you have, your guidelines might be a mile apart. They might only be 3 inches apart. But I guarantee you can have guidelines where people have flexibility about their work. Now, what's really interesting is to talk about the constraints. So when managers decide for other people, they are saying, you no longer have the capability to decide for yourself. We are going to decide for you. That's a power thing. That's actually not about a regulated industry. It's not about how we could do work here. And it starts off with the funniest things of all. A manager says, we're going to get in a tool to manage everybody's boards. Fine. They decide on that particular tool, and everybody has to use the same board. In what lifetime do people actually have the same work? Right, in the same organization, there are people who do a lot of experimentation. Think of them as security people, right? Security people are always responding to new risks. And then there are people who are on the keep the lights on projects where they have a pretty good idea of what's going on. And then and they can sort of predict what's going on. And then there are all the rest of us where we have a variety of projects, and sometimes we have a pretty good idea of what's going on, and sometimes we have no idea. Why we all want to use the same board?
For
I don't get it.
consistency, right?
Yeah, like who cares? I'm trying really hard not to swear. Am I allowed to swear
Oh,
now?
are you kidding me? You're definitely allowed to swear.
Oh, who the hell cares if the boards are consistent? I mean, I don't understand that at
Yeah.
all. That's a fake kind of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
when if manager said, we want to know if your cycle time gets above a week for a given item, because we are concerned that as an organization, it's not sufficiently agile, right? If your cycle time gets above a week, that's a totally different thing than having the same boards. And there are certainly teams that would say, a week, huh? We're lucky to get a month. Do you really need us to do a week? That's a wonderful conversation because now the managers are talking about a particular outcome for the organization, and then the teams and the other people are saying, are you really looking for this? That's a dialogue
Mm.
that
Yeah.
actually works.
And a guideline. A guideline is we want
And a
cycle
guideline.
times
Yeah.
around a week. Yeah.
Yep.
Uh,
Go on, Mike.
real
Go
quick,
on, Mike.
speaking of cycle time, another point that kind of threads throughout your writing is think about the cycle time of your decisions as a manager. And having worked in many large bureaucratic
You're being nice. Okay, keep going.
uh, organizations like 3 times as old as me. Um, yeah, I've seen decision cycle time as um, the effect it has, and just that really um, you explained it so well I couldn't do it justice. Could you riff on that for just a minute?
Sure. So let's just do yearly planning. And despite the fact that yearly planning is kind of crazy, right? In certainly in a pandemic year, but in any year, yearly planning is insufficient. But let's assume you could plan for a year. What I see happens in organizations is the managers start to think about September, right? September 1st to 15th, they all get together and they say, we need the project portfolio, we need the budget, we need to plan for the next year. So they go off, they have a meeting for an hour, they go all off, scurry away, they ask their teams and the people who report to them to go off and do estimation and budgeting and all this stuff. And a couple weeks later, the managers have another meeting for an hour. And then the team, they go off and ask for more information, right? So the managers only meet for an hour once a week, once every 2 weeks. Um, if I can do this correctly, so September through December is an entire quarter. Did I get that right?
A quarter
Quarter
plus
Maybe.
months. Yeah, quarter plus.
Okay, so that 4 months. So let's assume they had 8 meetings, right? Because that might be correct. A public
Yeah.
arithmetic. I'm not so
Yeah.
good at public
Close enough.
arithmetic.
Yeah.
Give me symbolic logic. I'm so much better. So let's let's assume there are 8 meetings at a total of 8 hours. So in terms of work time, the managers have 8 hours above the line. Their wait time is the 4 months underneath the 8 hours. All that,
Mm-hmm.
only 8 hours of work time times how many there are there how many hours in a week? I don't even know that.
40 work hours. Yeah.
No, because you got to include weekends.
Oh yeah.
So,
So then,
because it's
yeah,
the aging, right?
yeah.
So it's from September 1st through December 31st, or until they meet again in January. And then we all know what's going to happen by February 1st. They're going to change everything,
Everything gets thrown out. Everything gets thrown out.
right?
It's
So, yeah.
Keep going, Johanna. Keep going.
Yeah. So the cycle time is enormous, right? And if you don't actually understand what the cost of those decisions are, right? All the effort you asked the teams and the people to do to figure out their capital equipment. Why? I mean, I'm a one-person
Mm-hmm.
business. I don't know my own capital equipment in January. How can a large organization figure this out? I mean, you have guidelines, right? Every single person needs a chair, a computer, a VPN. I mean, they all
Yeah.
need stuff. And some of it is recurring expenses, some of it is investment in the future. I mean, the finance people actually understand what all this is. I think it's a load of hooey, but
It's
we,
absolutely a load of hooey. Absolutely.
yeah,
It's voodoo
but
chicken
what
waving to
we,
get to a number
well,
that we preordained. Yep.
right. So, I mean, we need to report our data in cost accounting terms. We don't need to manage ourselves in cost accounting.
Here I am. This is bad podcasting, but I'm here waving books around. I love the fact that Johanna introduced the idea of cycle time for decision making, because funnily enough, this weekend we have Jim Johnson on. We had him on to talk about decision latency theory, from the Standish Group. They crunched all that data, and they found that teams that are able to make decisions within less than, I think it was 5 hours, are something like 300% more likely to achieve their goal than teams that take twice that amount. And once a decision making goes over 8 hours, I think it gets something like 700%. It's something completely insane. But that is something that I hope all of our listeners think about. That how long does it take to actually cycle through a decision to say, hey, we have this question, who can give us the right answer? And your point about cost accounting, I mean, Johanna, I think you were being too kind. You said we start in September. It's March, and I've already had a couple conversations about 2022.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, it's quite exciting.
Yeah, and
Mike, you got another question?
yeah, but and one final thought on that topic. There's not only the cycle time, the impact on those decisions, and that there's also the impact on the human beings, the people, the morale.
Mhm.
I promise you, I've been in this gig for a fair few years, and it still just drains the energy out of me
Yes.
when we're going weeks and weeks and waiting for a blasted decision. When
Yep.
you know what the decision is, just people need to get on with it. Just
Yep. And
that's you, and that the effect on productivity and on morale and on creativity that causes is just mind-boggling.
and to extrapolate that further back to the whole coming up with the budget for next year, right? Like I know friends at companies where they lose, to your point, Johanna, almost an entire quarter doing planning for something that they
Yeah.
know is immediately going to change. And I got Jonathan Rasmussen going. He got all fired up about it too. He's like, "Oh, this annual budgeting thing, don't even get me started." It's a big pain point with a lot of people. And like you said, our data can be reported in cost accounting terms. However, we should not use cost accounting to actually drive decisions. That's where the incongruence comes in. Mike, we're quickly running up on time. I know we got a little bit of a late start. What's your final question for Johanna?
Final question for Johanna. Oh gosh, there's so many things.
We could easily go 3 hours on these shows. I know.
Yeah. Um, if you could, Johanna, if you could plant a thought in the minds of people who are just learning how to be managers, to help them be humans, human managers, what thought would you want to plant in people's heads?
I need to plant three, but
Okay.
I will make it fast. One is ask for help and admit that you don't know, right? So if I could talk about one thing for manage yourself, it would be say, I don't know, and ask for help. That allows other people to then say they don't know and ask for help. You model the behavior. And that the next thing is to treat the team as a harmonic whole, right? Drucker actually talked about teams as harmonic wholes. And this is not just a project team or a feature team or a product team. This is teams of managers, right? First level managers have to be peer cohorts. Second level, director level, senior level. It's so funny. We talk about the senior leadership team and the feature teams. What happened to all the managers in the middle? They're not chopped liver. So let's talk about them as a harmonic whole. And the third thing is to practice management innovation. I don't actually care if people read these books and say, "Oh, Johanna, you're just an idiot." I can live with that as long as they innovate themselves, right? If they think about management as a place to start the innovation, then I will be happy.
Awesome.
That is absolutely perfect. And that does bring us to right on time. For those of you listeners, I must publicly apologize to both Johanna and Mike. My computer decided to reboot itself right before we started recording, so we lost 10 minutes. This is a shorter episode, so I'm making the public offer to Johanna. You know, she knows the door is open, but we will do another recording where we can dig through the second half of her triumvirate of books.
Yeah, we can talk about performance management and stuff.
Oh yeah, there's I had so many questions.
You should
Yeah.
have me back. You should have me back to talk just about performance evaluations and performance management. We could do an entire
do
show
it.
on that.
I am writing it
Okay.
down. Perf eval and
I'm down for it.
All right, I will actually set that up. So Johanna, where can listeners find you? They want to pick up the books. They want to get more information on you. They want to see all the rest of the stuff you've done. Where do they go?
So everything is at jrothman.com, JROTHMAN.com. The book pages are there. I have a main page for all three books. Each individual book has its own page. I've been blogging about this. I know you're all so surprised. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff, and look for cohort-based learning events later on this year.
Ooh, I like that.
Awesome.
Sounds
I like the
interesting.
sound of that. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, once again, on behalf of Mike and myself, Johanna, I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening to join us. On behalf of Johanna, Mike, and myself, I want to thank all of you listeners for once again tuning in to what I hope was another great episode. We will have links to all of this stuff in the show notes. If you like what you heard, hop on the conversation in the Discord server. We are getting really busy. We're having somewhere between 3 and 5 new signups a day, and the dialogue is really developing into something truly positive. So get in on the ground floor. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we are dedicated to always being free. However, we do have a Patreon. If you like what you hear and you want to throw us a $1 or $2 every month to offset hosting costs, that would be great. You're going to get a surprise in the mail from me. We did order a bunch of tchotchke things lately. I believe the last one was a bunch of magnets. So who knows? You might get something fun in the mail. So once again, on behalf of Johanna, Mike, and myself, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. And until next time, this is the Agile Uprising Podcast signing out.